Shabbat Shalom. In this week's Parshat Yitro, the Torah seems to interrupt the flow of events, which had in the previous Parashot described the exodus of the Jews from Egypt, the splitting of the Red Sea, and at the end of the previous Parsha, the first encounter with our arch enemy Amalek, and now before moving on to the next chapter, the culmination of the whole process of Yetziat Mitzrayim, of coming out of Egypt, which was the event at Har Sinai, at Mount Sinai, Har Sinai, where we received the Torah. The Torah seems to have interrupted it with a sort of side story of Moshe's father-in-law coming out to greet him and bring him his estranged wife. It's the first time we learn that they've been estranged. And then after, Yitro gives Moshe some advice as to how to organize the judiciary system that he'd been using. We move on to Mount Sinai. Now, just how to handle this particular story and its placement where it is in the Torah has challenged Jewish interpreters of Scripture for centuries. And I would like to look here at basically two episodes. The earliest episode, which is already from the time of the Tanaim, from the beginning of the Common Era, and what were their considerations, what were the problems that motivated them, and the answers they proposed, and then look at two of the great medieval commentators and what troubled them and how they tried to answer it. So the first level of interpretation was troubled by questions raised by the first two psukim, the first two verses in this parsha. The first verse says, Vayishma Yitro, Yitro heard, Jethro heard. But what precisely did he hear? He heard about the Jews being taken out of Egypt, but was there some specific event that he heard about which motivated him to come and meet his son-in-law Moshe? And then the second verse, that he brought with him Tzipporah, Moshe's wife, Achar Shilucheha, after she'd been sent out, which seems almost as if they'd been divorced. The Torah didn't tell us anything about this episode, and what motivated him to think that now was the time to try to reunite Moshe and Tzipporah. And we have three different answers. Rabbi Yoshua says, Milchemet Amalek Shama. What motivated Yitro to come out was the story of the battle with Amalek. Why? And how does this connect to bringing Tzipporah? Because when he learned about because first of all, Yitro was from Midian, and the Yitro and his clan had very close relations. I mean, neighborly relations, maybe ethnic relations with Amalek, which continued even to the time of Shaul HaMelech, when he had his fight with Amalek. And when he heard that this fight had ended with a vow to continue the war against Amalek forever and ever, he feared that as this had developed, it would make the reunification of Moshe and Tzipporah impossible. He wouldn't want to marry a woman from Midian when he's in the midst of this, just beginning this long-standing conflict with Amalek. So we thought now was the time to bring her back and get them reunited. Eliezer Modiah said, Matan Torah Shema. Even though the Torah tells us about Matan Torah only in the chapters that follow, but the Torah does not necessarily relate things in chronological order, and he felt that Yitro had heard about Matan Torah, and what did he hear? He heard that when Moshe told the Jews to prepare themselves for this great event, this mass theophany, where 600,000 people will have some prophetic revelation, some level of prophetic revelation, one of the conditions was that they should separate themselves from their wives, not have any carnal relations for 3 days. And Yitro reasoned, well, they had to separate for 3 days because these are just regular people who are going to have this once-in-a-lifetime experience, and then they'll go back to being normal people and lead normal lives. But because Moshe will continue to be a prophet and will continue to have prophetic revelations and has to always be ready for the visit of the Shekhinah, Moshe will very likely swear off or not have any interest in having a wife or relations with a woman forever. So now's the time to bring back Tzipporah before that takes hold. And so that's why he decided that he would bring Tzipporah back and get them reunited before Moshe swore off women for the rest of his life. Finally, Rabbi Eliezer says, Kriyat Yamsuf Shema, that splitting of the Red Sea. Now this has to do with a well-known adage, Kasher Zivu Goshe Ben Adam or Bnei Adam Ke Kriyat Yamsuf, that finding the proper mate is as hard as splitting the Red Sea, which we usually interpret to mean that it's so hard, to find the right person and then get the relationship going and then to keep it going. It's almost as hard as splitting the Red Sea. But Yitro was thinking in different terms. He was thinking in terms of how hard it is to reunite a couple after they have separated. And when he heard that after the Red Sea had separated, the waters came back and were flowing as one, just as before, this encouraged him to think that there was a chance it could happen that Moshe and Tzipporah would be reunited and go back to being, a happily married couple. And so this is why he brought Tzipporah with him at that time. Now, moving on to the medieval period, let's look at two of the greatest medieval interpreters, the greatest interpreters of all time, Rabbi Avram ibn Ezra and the Ramban, Moshe ben Nachman. And their question is much more general. It's not so much the details that we've talked about now, but one simple question. Did the meeting with Yitro take place before Matan Torah or after Matan Torah? And if so, depending on how we interpret it, how do we explain the ordering of the Parsha? Rabbi Avram ibn Ezra felt that the meeting took place after Matan Torah. Now, in our own Parsha, for example, when Moshe Rabbeinu, when Yitro, in the next story, when Moshe is judging the nation, the people have these long lines of people coming to Moshe to adjudicate their cases, and Yitro can't believe that this one man, Moshe, is sitting there and having a line of people that goes on and on forever, and from the morning to the evening, he's just settling their disputes. So he asks Moshe, "What are you doing? What is this all about?" Moshe says, "Well, people have these arguments, these disputes, and then I inform them, Chukei Elohim v'Toratav." So there must have been a Torah already, and that was what Moshe was using to judge them. In that case, why did the Torah put the parsha of the story of Yitro right as it did right after Amalek? To make an important point, because as I've already mentioned, Amalek and Yitro are basically the same ethnicity, they're neighbors, and the Torah wanted to make the point that just as there are evil non-Jews like Amalek who have nothing to do in the world but make trouble for the Jews and harm Jews, there are also good people from the same ethnic group. There's nothing racial here at all, like Yitro and his clan, who are related by marriage to Moshe and who come and greets him warmly, and then Yitro can give Moshe a very sound advice, which Moshe adopts as to how to manage his judiciary. So the Torah is making a point not to generalize about the non-Jews or even about any specific group of non-Jews. There are the bad, then there's the good, and we have to realize that that's how things divide up most everywhere. And the Torah wanted to make that point, which is much more important than the chronological ordering of the events. But the Ramban doesn't think so, because for the Ramban, the chronological ordering is extremely important. The timeline of the Torah, the way things are described from the creation of the world through the liberation from Egypt and the up to the end of Moshe's life is an extremely important detail which has parallels on the cosmic level, and the timeline is an integral part of his theology and his mysticism. And the phrase that we all know, "Emukdamu Torah," that the Torah parashot are not arranged, in chronological order. This is not a blank check to order to fix some a time for any parsha as we see with regard to the chronological flow of events. It's only a specific tool to be used in a very small number of specific cases. So here we have the two great commentators who each of them are well aware that in this case, as in so many other cases of interpreting the Torah, there is no clear-cut answer. There are verses here and there are verses there. There are plenty of verses in Shemot and later on in the other stories about Yitro in the Torah that seem to indicate quite clearly that the meaning took place after Matan Torah, and verses that indicate that it took place before. So there's no way to solve the issue with saying, I'll quote you a pasuk, because the other person can quote a pasuk as well. But what you have is some basic fundamental hashkafa, some basic fundamental idea or approach as to what the Torah is all about and how it's telling its story. And that's what guides you to understand the Torah and the connection between Parshiot. Thank you very much, and Shabbat Shalom.